Welcome back, learners, to our interesting course based on the theme Rudimentary Principles and Practices of Managerial Economics. I am Dr. Shantanu Saurabh, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, DAV PG College, Banaras Hindu University. In this Module 10, lecture number 49, based on the theme Forms of Market and Perfect Competition, today we'll be covering three important topics one by one. The first topic will be change in equilibrium price due to change in demand and supply. Second, we'll be discussing determination of price under perfect competition. And third, and the most important thing today we'll be discussing will be firm's equilibrium under perfect competition. That is the TRTC approach, which is also known as total revenue and total cost approach. So one by one, today we'll be taking all these 3 points with you. So change in equilibrium price due to change in demand and supply. So in perfect competition, equilibrium is determined by total demand and total supply, which means the equilibrium in perfect competition is determined by the total demand and total supply in the market. If there is any change in the demand or supply, its effect will be seen or visible on the equilibrium price, which means if there is any deviations either in the demand or in the supply, it will be visible in the equilibrium price. So in this section, we will study the effect of change in demand and supply on the equilibrium price, which means we'll try to understand and analyze the effect or impact of change in demand or supply on the equilibrium price. So one by one we'll be starting. The first we'll be taking will be change in demand. You know that demand is the epicenter around which all the activities involve. So if there is any change, whether increase or decrease in demand, then the equilibrium price will always show a positive change, which means if there is either increase in demand or decrease in demand, in both the cases the equilibrium price will show a positive change, which is a very important dimension and a one to be remembered. If the demand increases, the price will also increase, which means if the demand increases from 10 to 20, the price will also increase. And with the decrease in demand, the price will also fall down, which means if there is increase in the demand, the price will increase, and if there is decrease in the demand, the price will fall down. So whether there is increase or decrease in the demand, the equilibrium will show a positive change, as we are able to understand through this point. So in this point we have discussed about change in demand, whether there is increase or decrease, the price will increase if there is increase in demand, and if the demand will fall, there will be decrease in the price. Now we will be discussing the diagrammatic representation of change in demand. As can be seen in the figure, you are able to see the figure on the screen. DD here, this DD line you are able to see here is the original demand curve, and the SS here you are able to see here, the SS is the supply curve, which means this is the demand curve and this is the supply curve. You are able to see on the screen both DD and SS curve intersect at point E. You are able to see here is the point E. So demand and supply are intersecting each other at point E. At this point, OP is the equilibrium price, which means this is OP. You are able to see where E is intersecting. OP is the equilibrium price. OP here is the equilibrium price, and OQ is the equilibrium quantity. You are able to see here OQ is the equilibrium quantity here, and OP is the equilibrium price. If the demand increases here, the demand curve DD shifts upwards to D1, D1, which means the demand curve from here shifts to here D1 to D1, and SS curve intersect each other at point E1, which means demand curve has shifted from DD to D1, D1, you are able to see here, and SS curve you are able to see here. So they intersect here at point E1, which you are able to see here, the point E1. So here OP1 becomes the new equilibrium price. In this case, you are able to see this OP1 becomes the new equilibrium price, and OQ1 becomes the equilibrium quantity, which means here OQ1 becomes the equilibrium quantity. On the other hand, if there is decrease in the demand or the demand decreases, the demand curve DD shifts downwards to D2, which means you are able from DD here, it shifts downward to D2. We are able to see on the diagram D2 here. This D2 curve and SS curve intersect at point E2. You are able to see here, this is the E2 point where demand and supply are intersecting each other. In this case, OP2 becomes the new equilibrium price, which means here OP2 becomes the new equilibrium price and OQ2 becomes the equilibrium quantity, which is OQ2 we are able to see here becomes the equilibrium quantity. So to summarize, we can say that if there is increase in demand from DD curve to D1, the equilibrium is this point. If the demand is decreased to D2, the equilibrium is this point. So I have made you understand how this change in demand affects the equilibrium price and the quantity. I hope you are able to understand this diagram. Now, diagrammatic representation of change in supply. In the last slide, we were discussing about the demand. Now we'll be trying to understand the diagrammatic representation of change in supply. As can be seen in the figure, DD is the original demand curve you are able to see here, and SS is the supply curve. You are able to see SS here is the supply curve here, SS is the supply curve. Both DD and SS intersect at point E. You are able to see here, this is the point E. So demand and supply are intersecting each other at this point E. You are able to see here. At this point, OP is the equilibrium price, which means at this point you are able to see they are intersecting here. OP is the equilibrium price and OQ is the equilibrium quantity, which means this is the equilibrium quantity OQ and OP here is the equilibrium price. If the supply increases, the demand curve shifts to S2, S2. Which means if the supply increases, that supply curve shifts to S2, S2. You are able to see here. This S2 curve and DD curve intersect at point E2. You are able to see here. The S2 curve is intersecting with the DD curve at this point, which is known as E2 point. Here the price decreases here, and OP2 becomes the new equilibrium price, which means we need to understand here that here if the supply is increasing, the price, if supply increases from SS to SS2, S2, S2, the new equilibrium becomes OP2 and the OP2 you are able to see here is the new equilibrium and OQ2 becomes the equilibrium quantity. OQ2 becomes the equilibrium quantity. On the other hand, on the contradiction, if supply decreases, the supply curve SS shifts to S1, S1. From SS to S1, S1 as you are able to see on the screen. This S1 curve and DD curve intersect at point E1. You are able to see here, this is point E1, they are intersecting here. So in this case, the price increased to OP1. The price is increasing here to OP1 when the supply is decreasing and OP1 becomes the new equilibrium price. Here OP1 is the new equilibrium price and OQ1 becomes the equilibrium quantity, which means OQ1 here is the equilibrium quantity. So change in supply, if there is any change, whether increase or decrease in supply, then the equilibrium price will show a negative change, which is a very important point to be understood and remembered. I'm repeating this point. If there is any change like increase or decrease in supply, the equilibrium price will show a negative change. If the supply increases, the price will fall down, as we have discussed in this diagram, that if the supply is increasing, the price will gradually fall down, and with any decrease in supply, the price will rise, which means if the supply is decreasing, the price will rise. So that is the crux of this diagrammatic representation of change in supply, that which means if there is increase or decrease in supply, the equilibrium will show a always negative change. If the supply increases, the price will fall down. On the contradiction, if there is decrease in supply, the price will gradually rise. I hope you are clear with this diagram. Now, we will be discussing simultaneous change in both demand and supply. Simultaneous change in both demand and supply. If both the demand and supply change simultaneously, it will also have an effect on the equilibrium price, which means if the demand and supply change simultaneously, it will have an effect on the equilibrium price. This change can be basically of 4 types, which are described as follow. We have described it. Increase in both the demand as well as the supply. So what will happen? We will discuss this. If there is increase in both the demand and supply, which means the demand as well as the supply both are increasing, then there will be opposite effect on the equilibrium price, which means if there is increase in demand and supply, then there will be opposite effect on the equilibrium price. If the increase in demand is more than the supply, which means demand is increase in demand is more as compared to the supply, then there will be a rise in equilibrium price, which means the demand increases more in ratio as compared to the supply, then there will be rise in the equilibrium price. Whereas on the contrary, if the increase in supply is more, the supply is more than the demand, then there will be fall in the equilibrium price, which means when the supply is more as compared to the demand, there will be fall in the equilibrium price. In another case, if there is increase in both the demand and supply at the same rate of price, then there will be no change in the equilibrium price, which you need to understand very precisely, that if there is increase in both the demand and supply together at the same rate, there will be no change in the equilibrium price. So in this we have discussed that if there is increase first of all in demand as compared to the supply, there will be rise in equilibrium price. On the contradiction, if there is increase in supply more as compared to demand, then there will be fall in the equilibrium price. And then we discussed that if there is increase in both demand and supply at the same rate, then there will be no change in the equilibrium point. This is an important dimension which you need to understand and remember. I hope it is making sense. Moving further, decrease in both the demand and supply. If decrease in demand is more than supply, then there will be reduction in equilibrium price, which means the decrease in demand is more as compared to the supply, then there will be reduction in the equilibrium price. And on the contrary, on the other hand, if the decrease in supply is more than the demand, in such a case the equilibrium price will rise. You need to understand this very particularly, that if there is decrease in demand which is more than the supply, then there will be reduction in equilibrium price. On the contrary, on the other hand, if the decrease in supply is more than the demand, in such case equilibrium price will rise. The third case, increase in demand and decrease in supply. If the demand increases and supply falls, demand is increasing here and the supply is falling here, then this will lead to rise in the equilibrium price of the commodity, which means the demand is increasing and the supply is gradually falling, and it will finally lead to rise in the equilibrium price of the commodity. And fourth, decrease in demand and increase in supply. If the demand decreases and supply increases, which means demand is decreasing and the supply is increasing, then there will be sharp fall in the equilibrium price of the commodity. I hope you are able to understand these 4 dimensions. I am just repeating it for you. If there is increase in both the demand and supply, if If there is increase in both the demand and supply, then there will be opposite effect or impact on the equilibrium price. As you are able to see, if the increase in demand is more as compared to supply, then there will be rise in equilibrium price. Then when the increase in supply is more than the demand, then there will be fall in the equilibrium price. And in another case, if there is increase in both the demand and supply at the same rate, then there will be no change. Then we discussed about decrease in both demand and supply. If there is decrease in demand is more than supply, then there will be reduction in equilibrium. Reduction here in equilibrium price. On the other hand, if there is decrease in supply is more than the demand, in such a case, the equilibrium price will rise here. And then we discussed increase in demand and decrease in supply. If the demand increases and supply falls, which means demand is increasing here, supply is falling, this will lead to rise in the equilibrium price of the commodity. And fourth, we discussed decrease in demand and increase in supply, in which we discussed if the demand decreases and supply increases, there will be sharp fall in the equilibrium price of the commodity. Now I hope all of you must be clear with this dimension. Moving further, the determination of price under perfect competition. The price under perfect competition is determined by the powers of total demand and total supply of the industry, which means the price in the perfect competition is determined or calculated by the powers or the factors of total demand and total supply of the industry. As you must be remembering that in perfect competition, the prices are being taken by the industry and the firms have no role in determining the prices. No individual buyer or seller is in a position to change the price set by the industry, which means the price here is being set by the industry and no individual firm or buyer or seller is able to change or do anything in this. So sellers take the price as it is and sell that much quantity only at which the MC is equal to MR, which means the seller here adopt the price being decided by the industry and sell that much quantity at which the MC here, MC is equal to MR, and on the other hand, buyer purchase at that price which has been determined. So the industry here, which is a very important point to be understood, becomes the price maker and the firm becomes the price taker, which means the industry decides the price. So it is price maker and the individual firms are the price taker. The equilibrium price decided by the industry is also average revenue and marginal revenue curves of the firm, which means the equilibrium price decided by the industry is the AR and MR curve of the firm. I hope this is clear to all of you. Now moving ahead, diagrammatic representation or determination of price under perfect competition. The figure represents how the price is determined by the demand and supply curve in the industry. As you are able to see this diagram, the point where demand and supply curves intersect decides the equilibrium price, which means where the point where demand and supply are intersecting, this is the point, decides the equilibrium price. This price is then taken by firms in perfect competition, which means the industry here is deciding the price and the same price, as you are able to see, P is equal to AR is equal to MR, the same price is being adopted by the respective firms. The price adopted by the firms is equal to AR and MR of the firms too. So the price adopted by the firms here, which the firms have adopted, is equal to AR and MR of the firms. To summarize, we can say this, that here the industry is the price maker, it is determining the price at this point, and the firm is respectively taking the price being decided by the industry. So industry is price maker and the firm is the price taker. Now firm's equilibrium under perfect competition. In the words of Hansen, a firm will be in equilibrium when it is of no advantage to increase or decrease the output, which means the equilibrium point is that point where there is no use of increasing or decreasing its output. So under perfect competition, a firm is in equilibrium when it has no incentive to change, either increase or decrease the level of its output, which means in perfect competition, the equilibrium point is that point where the firm has no incentive to increase or decrease the level of output. Such level of output or equilibrium position is determined at that point where the firm enjoys the maximum profit, which means the such level of output is attained at that point where the firm gains maximum profit. And this is an important dimension to be remembered and understood. There are two approaches of determining a firm's equilibrium under perfect competition, which are discussed as below. Today in this session, we'll be discussing the TRTC approach. In the next session, we'll be discussing the MRMC approach. So first, the TRTC approach, which is also known as total revenue and total cost approach. Under this approach, the total revenue and total cost of the firm are compared with each other, which means the TR and TC are compared with each other. The firm earns the maximum level of profit at a point where the difference between TR and TC is largest. That is the point. The firm earns the maximum level of profit where this difference between TR and TC is largest. Now, if you are able to see the diagram, the firm's equilibrium under perfect competition, the TRTC approach. As can be seen in the figure, TR is the total revenue curve, as you are able to see here. This TR is the total revenue curve, and TC is the total cost. You are able to see here, TC is the total cost curve of the firm. TR is upward sloping and linear curve. As you are able to see here, TR is upward sloping and linear curve and increases at same rate because the price is same under perfect competition. Why? Because the price here is remaining same. And the TC curve follows the law of production. You are able to see here the TC curve, it is following the law of production. Thus, at first it decreases. Here you are able to see it is decreasing and then starts increasing. Here it is decreasing and then it is starting increasing. If the firm produces less than OX, you are able to see here, this is less than OX and more than OZ quantity of output, less than OX and more than this OZ quantity, then it will have to incur or suffer losses. This is because at these levels of output, TR is less than TC. You are able to see here, TR here is less than TC. So the firm will be incurring losses here in these two conditions. A and B here, point A and B here, denote the break-even points of the firm. Here point A and point B represent the break-even point. The firm will be in equilibrium between OX and OZ. The firm here will be in equilibrium between OX and OZ. You are able to see here OZ, where the difference between TR and TC is maximum. Now, C represents the equilibrium point. Now, this C here, you are able to see here, is the equilibrium point where the firm gets the maximum profit CD. The CD you are able to see here is the maximum profit by producing OY, here OY quantity of output. This is the point where the firm is gaining maximum profit. This approach has a limitation, it is difficult to find out the difference between TR and TC. Now, that brings to end of our presentation. We have discussed basically these three important points one by one. We talked about change in equilibrium price due to change in demand and supply, determination of price under perfect competition, and finally we talked about the TRTC approach. Here we talked about change in equilibrium price due to change in demand and supply. The first we talked about when there is only change in demand, either increase or decrease in demand, it will always show a positive change, which is a very important dimension to be remembered. Then we talked about diagrammatic representation of it. We talked here that the demand was moving from DD to D1 and DD to D2, and the point where it is intersecting the supply curve, that is the equilibrium. We discussed about this, and then we discussed about the diagrammatic representation of change in supply. Here we discussed about change in demand, and then we discussed about change in supply. Then we talked about simultaneous change in both the demand and supply, not only of demand only or supply only. We talked about simultaneous change in both demand and supply. And here we discussed if there is increase in both the demand and supply, there will be opposite effect on the equilibrium price. If the increase in demand is more than supply, then there will be rise in equilibrium price, and on the other hand, if there is increase in supply is more as compared to demand, there will be fall in the equilibrium price. And in another case, if there is increase in both the demand and supply at the same constant rate, then there will be no change in the equilibrium. We have discussed this. Then we discussed about decrease in both the demand and supply, which means there is decrease in demand more as compared to supply, then there will be reduction in equilibrium. And on the other hand, if there is decrease in supply is more, then in such a case the equilibrium price will rise. Third, we discussed about increase in demand and decrease in supply, in which the demand increases and supply gradually falls, and this will lead to rise in the equilibrium price of the commodity. And finally, the fourth we discussed was decrease in demand and increase in supply. If the demand decreases, the supply increases, then there will be sharp fall in the equilibrium price of the commodity. So one by one we discussed all these four. Then here we discussed that how determination of price is done under perfect competition, where the industry is the price decider and the firms are the price taker. We discussed this with the help of diagram. Here at the point you are able to see this point where the demand and supply curve were intersecting, that is the equilibrium, and the same price is being adopted by the firm. It is being decided by the industry and adopted by the firm. We have discussed this in detail. Then we finally discussed about the TR-TC approach, which is total revenue and total cost approach, and the firm earns the maximum level of profit where the difference between TR and TC is the largest. We have discussed this. So C here, the point C here represents the equilibrium point where the firm gets the maximum profit, CD, maximum profit here it has attained by producing OY quantity of output. The limitation of this was it is difficult to find out the difference between TR and TC here. So that's all for this presentation. In this presentation, we tried to discuss and understand different dimensions of perfect competition and equilibrium. I hope it will be of use for you. Thank you for patiently listening to this lecture, and we'll catch up in the upcoming sessions. Thank you.